Zira stepped off the silver ship and took her first breath of Earth's air. It smelled strange to her, clean, but full of strange scents like trees, machines, and people. Her long white cloak fluttered behind her as she walked down the ramp with quiet grace. The translator device sat gently in her ear, glowing blue with each spoken word it captured and changed. Back home on her planet Varelia, everyone had warned her humans were loud, emotional, and unpredictable, but Zira was not afraid. She was trained for this mission since childhood. She was the daughter of an alien ambassador, chosen to bring peace between Earth and Varelia. This was the first real contact between their species since the war 50 years ago. As she reached the landing pad, a man stepped forward with a smile on his face and his hand raised in welcome. "Hello," he said warmly. "Welcome to Earth." The translator buzzed for a moment, and Zira heard the words in her own tongue. She bowed slightly, her pale eyes watching him carefully. "I am Zira of the Varelian Peace Order," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I come with open hands." The man nodded, trying not to stare too long at her glowing skin and high cheekbones. "My name's Eli," he said. "I'm here to help you during your stay." The translator device made a soft click, and the words changed into something strange. Zira blinked, shocked. In her language, the words sounded like, "I will take you and make you mine." Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, calm eyes, kind smile, but his words had sounded like a command. She tilted her head, confused but silent, back on her planet. That phrase meant something sacred, an ancient bond, unbreakable and final. She had no idea humans used it so casually, or worse, that her translator might be broken. Eli didn't notice her reaction. He simply turned and waved toward a car nearby. "Come, I'll show you the human capital," he said cheerfully. Zira's translator spoke again, but now it twisted his words even more. It told her, "Follow me to your new life." "With me," Zira hesitated, but then followed him, believing she had somehow agreed to be his companion. Inside the car, Eli tried to make small talk. "You must be tired after your long trip," he said. Zira blinked as her device changed it into, "I will carry you to my rest place." Her cheeks warmed with pink color, a rare thing for her species. She looked at him, unsure if this was normal human courting behavior or something personal. Back on Varelia, such words meant one thing: he had chosen her. She didn't speak much during the drive, just nodded and watched the strange Earth buildings pass by. Eli thought she was just shy. They arrived at the guest center, a tall glass building prepared for alien visitors. Eli opened the door for her and gave a gentle smile. "After you," he said politely. The translator said, "Enter your new home." Zira stepped inside slowly, looking around at the clean walls, soft lights, and quiet hum of machines. The place was beautiful, almost like the peace temples back home. She sat on a chair while Eli brought her some food, a tray with fruit, water, and a strange sweet item wrapped in paper. "It's chocolate," he said, "a human favorite." Zira's device translated it as a love gift. She stared at the brown item, then at Eli. She carefully unwrapped it and took a bite. It melted in her mouth, sweet and smooth, and for a second, she forgot her confusion. When she looked at him again, he smiled and said, "You like it?" The translator turned that into, "You accept my offering." Zira nodded slowly, unsure how much of this was tradition or mistake. Still, she felt warmth in her chest. He had not hurt her, not forced her, only shown her kindness, but something felt off, like the words didn't match the actions. Zira excused herself and walked to her room, holding the translator in her hand. She looked at it closely, no cracks, no flashing lights, but something was wrong. She opened a small panel on the side and saw something strange, a symbol not from her world. It looked like it was Earth-made. Her heart beat faster. Did someone replace her device? Was this a human trick? Or worse, was someone trying to ruin her mission? She sat on the bed and stared at the wall, thinking hard. If the translator was broken, how many things had she misunderstood? And what did Eli really say to her? She thought about his face, so kind, so open. He didn't look like someone trying to trap her or lie. But if she couldn't trust her ears, what else had she missed? As the night fell, Zira looked out the window at the stars above. One thing was clear: her mission had already gone off course. And tomorrow she would find out why. Zira didn't sleep that night. She sat near the window, staring at the stars above Earth, her hand tightly gripping the translator device. The soft hum of the room's power systems filled the silence, but inside her head, everything was loud and confusing. She had trained for years to understand other species, to stay calm, to represent her people with honor. But now she wasn't sure if she had already made a mistake in her culture. Bonding was sacred. It only happened once in a lifetime. If her translator had twisted Eli's words, had she unknowingly entered a bond she didn't understand? And if she had, could she take it back? In the morning, she dressed in her official robes and went to meet Eli in the common area. He was waiting with a smile, sipping hot liquid from a mug, and reading something from a screen. "Good morning, Zira," he said cheerfully. The translator whispered the words into her ear as, "You belong to me now." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at him, stunned, her heart pounding faster than before. Eli looked confused by her silence and placed the mug down. "You okay?" he asked. The translator said, "You are mine now. Speak, my chosen." Zira forced herself to speak, choosing her words slowly. "Am I to serve you now?" she asked, unsure if her meaning was clear. Eli blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Serve me?" he repeated, laughing softly. "No, you're the ambassador. I'm just here to assist." She heard, "You are my gift, I command." The words didn't match his eyes, or his tone, or his actions. But the translator kept lying. Zira's fingers clenched tightly at her side. She needed to know the truth. And she needed to fix this before it got worse. All day, she followed Eli through the city. They visited government buildings, met with human leaders, and took official photos together. People stared at her with wide eyes, whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. Eli stayed close, always respectful, always careful. He opened doors for her, offered water, explained human customs, but to her, everything sounded like secret. Bonding rituals, she thought every little thing was a step deeper into commitment. At lunch, Eli said, "You can try this dish. It's from my home region," the translator said. "This food is for my mate." Zira's hands trembled as she took a bite, believing she was now part of something serious. She couldn't tell anyone. This was too embarrassing, too dangerous. If she accused a human of forced bonding, war could break out. If she admitted she misunderstood, her own people would call her weak. As they walked through a garden later that afternoon, Eli stopped near a large fountain and sat on a stone bench. Zira stood beside him, unsure if she should sit. He patted the seat beside him. "Relax," he said. "It's just a bench." Her translator turned it into, "Come close, it is time." She sat down slowly, her face red with heat, her thoughts spinning. She looked at him carefully. Was he really trying to bond with her? Or was all of this a huge mistake? Eli noticed her quiet look and gave a small smile. "Zira," he said, "you've been really quiet today. Is everything okay between us?" The translator said, "Tell me now, do you accept me as your one?" Zira stood up quickly, her voice shaking. "I must return to my quarters," she said, bowing slightly. Without waiting for his answer, she turned and walked fast down the garden path, heart pounding, thoughts racing. Back in her room, she opened her small personal scanner and placed the translator inside. She activated the scan, watching as numbers and symbols ran across the small screen. A moment later, the scan stopped, and one message appeared in red letters. "Foreign code detected." Her breath froze. Someone had changed her translators programming. This wasn't a malfunction. It was a setup. Someone wanted her to misunderstand everything, to fall into a false bond, to destroy her mission and her name. But who would do this? She had no enemies unless Someone didn't want peace between Earth and Varelia. She reached into her travel bag and pulled out her backup translator. It was older and slower, but it was clean, untouched, and safe. She placed it into her ear and heard a soft chime. Then she played back Ila's earlier voice from the device's memory. This time when he said, "Welcome to Earth," it really translated as "Welcome to Earth." Zira sat down hard on the bed, her hands over her face. Tears formed in her eyes, not from sadness, but from shame and shock. Everything she had thought, everything she believed about Ila, was twisted by a lie, but someone had done this on purpose. She didn't know who, but she was going to find out, and she was going to stop them before her mistake turned into something far more dangerous. Zira stared at the old backup translator lying in her hand like it was a piece of forgotten truth. Her chest felt heavy, not from sadness alone, but from how close she had come to disaster. She had almost formed a sacred bond with a human who didn't even know it, and all because someone had tampered with her trust, her words, and her ears. The clean translator worked slowly, but it was real. It told the truth, even if the truth was dull, plain, or not what she wanted to hear. That night, she didn't rest. Instead, she sat in silence, going back through every conversation she'd had with Ila. She replayed each one with the backup device, and with every word, the lie became clearer. Ila had never said anything romantic, never demanded anything, never claimed her. All of it was a trick played by the broken translator, or worse, by someone who wanted her to believe lies. She walked to the window and stared out at the stars again, but this time, her face was hard with resolve. Who would do this? Who could get close enough to her translator to rewrite its programming? Only someone from the embassy or from the team that helped prepare her for the mission. She thought about the last face she saw before leaving Varelia, a man named Dallin. A quiet tech officer with cold eyes and a too-perfect smile. He had touched her gear during final checks and said, "Everything is ready." Now she wondered, ready for what? Morning came too soon, and Zira put the clean device in her ear before leaving her room. She kept the broken one hidden deep in her bag. As she stepped into the hall, Ila was already there waiting. He smiled and waved, holding a small cup of steaming liquid in his hand. "I brought you tea," he said, offering it to her. The translator spoke clearly. "Honestly, I brought you tea." For the first time, she smiled back without fear. "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup. Ila noticed her calm eyes and raised a brow. "You seem different today," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Zira nodded, but inside her mind, she was planning. She needed to tell someone, but not yet. If the traitor knew she had found the truth, they might disappear. She needed proof, solid and clear, something she could show both Earth and Varelia. Without question, at the day's meeting, she watched everything closely. Not just the people in the room, but the security, the assistants, the tech crew. One of the humans spoke to her through a translation screen, but Zira asked to use her own device instead. She used the broken one. She needed it active to trace where the hidden code had come from. Later, when no one was watching, she connected the translator to her scanner again and accessed the hidden files. That's when she found it, a signal log. The sabotage didn't happen on Earth. The bad code was uploaded back on Varelia from an encrypted signal that came from deep inside the tech division. She stared at the name on the sender line. Dallin. She was right. He was the one who set the trap. But that raised a bigger question. Why? Zira looked around the guest center, unsure who she could trust now. If Dallin had allies here, she might already be in danger, and if she failed this mission, the peace between Earth and her people would fall apart. Ila returned from another meeting that afternoon and found her standing in the center's garden, alone and thinking. "Zira," he said gently, "are you sure you're okay?" She turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "Ila," she said, "would you trust me if I told you something strange?" He blinked, confused but curious. "Try me," he said. She handed him the broken translator and showed him the scan results on her small device. He read through them, his face changing as he understood. "This isn't just broken," he said slowly. This was done on purpose." Zira nodded once. "I think someone wanted to ruin everything," she whispered. "Not just my mission, but peace itself." Eli looked at her with wide eyes. "Why would anyone do that?" he asked. Zira's voice was cold and certain. "Because peace is not good for people who profit from fear." The wind moved through the garden trees, and for a moment, the air felt heavier than before. She looked at him again. "I need your help, Eli," she said. "Not just as a human, but as someone who speaks the truth." Eli gave her a small nod. "Then let's speak the truth together," he said, and from that moment, Zira knew she wasn't alone anymore. Now it wasn't just about a broken device. It was about saving everything they had both come to believe in. The night was warm, but Zira felt cold as she sat in her room staring at the broken translator on the table. The glowing blue light on the device had stopped blinking, as if it had finally run out of lies outside. The city lights of Earth twinkled like the stars she had crossed to get here. But peace didn't feel close anymore. It felt like something she had to fight for now. She had proof of sabotage. She had a name. But what she didn't have yet was time. Because just before sunset, her room door had been left open when she returned from dinner. Nothing was stolen, but the position of her bag had changed. Someone had been there, and they were looking for the broken device. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she set up a silent alarm system using her embassy tech kit. If anyone entered her room again, she would know. At the same time, Eli worked. From his side, he contacted a few trusted friends inside Earth Security Command without telling them too much. He asked for a deep scan of the guest center's logs, especially connections to foreign tech signals. By morning, they both had what they needed. Zira had traced the last update to her device directly to a cloaked signal one that bounced through 5 false Earth satellites before vanishing into deep space. The code signature matched Virelian encryption perfectly. Eli, meanwhile, found something stranger. Someone had accessed the guest center's control room 2 nights ago using a stolen identity badge. The security camera in that hallway had been cut off during those 5 minutes. All signs pointed to one fact: whoever did this was still watching her. Still waiting, but for what? Later that day, Eli and Zira were invited to a formal reception inside Earth's interplanetary hall. It was a fancy event, with flashing cameras, music, and guests from many planets. Zira wore a soft silver gown stitched with light patterns from her homeworld. Eli wore a dark suit with a simple pin showing Earth's symbol of peace. Everything looked calm, beautiful, welcoming. But Zira could feel something was wrong. She spotted a face across the room. A face she hadn't seen since she left Virelia. Dallin. He was standing beside a high-ranking Earth official, smiling politely, acting like he belonged. Zira froze. Eli noticed and followed her gaze. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Dallin, the one who altered my device." Eli didn't blink. He simply placed a hand on her back and whispered, "Stay calm, I have an idea." They moved toward the food tables, pretending to mingle with other guests. Eli slipped away and contacted his security contact, sending them Dallin's name and photo. Meanwhile, Zira circled the room slowly until she stood near Dallin. He noticed her and smiled. "Ambassador Zira," he said smoothly. "It's so good to see you again." Her translator, now the clean one, told her exactly what he said. No tricks, no lies. She smiled back with effort. "You made it all the way to Earth," she said, voice calm but sharp. Dallin chuckled. "Just doing my duty," he replied. "I was asked to observe your progress." She tilted her head slightly. "Is that what you call reprogramming my translator?" she asked, voice low so only he could hear. His smile didn't fade. Instead, he leaned closer and said, "You weren't supposed to survive the confusion." Zira stepped back, her eyes wide with quiet anger. "But here I am," she said, still standing. Before Dallin could reply, 2 security officers appeared beside him. "Sir," one of them said, "we need to speak with you now." Dallin raised his hands calmly, but there was a strange look in his eyes, like a wild animal that had just been spotted in the open. As he was escorted away, Eli returned to Zira's side. "You were right," he said softly. "He's part of a rogue group that wants war." Zira looked at the spot where Dallin had stood. She felt no victory, only sadness that someone from her own people would try to destroy everything they had worked for. But something still didn't make sense. If he wanted to stop peace, she said slowly, why not just send a threat? Why use a translator glitch to trick me into bonding? Eli paused, thinking hard, because if you had truly bonded with someone unknowingly, he said, you would have been shamed, removed from duty, maybe even exiled. Zira's eyes widened. With understanding, they didn't want war right away. She whispered, they wanted me to fall, so someone more aggressive would take my place. Someone who would hate Earth. Someone who would make war feel like the only answer. She looked at Eli, and they almost won. She said, but they didn't, he replied. That night, Zira returned to her room knowing the danger had not ended. Dallin was only one part of a bigger plan, but now she had allies and she had the truth. She looked at the stars again and whispered, a promise to herself. No more lies, no more confusion, only truth and a future worth protecting. Zira stood in the middle of the empty hall where the reception had taken place just hours earlier. The lights were dim now, the laughter and music gone, replaced by silence that felt heavier than before. In her hand, she held the broken translator again. It was no longer a device, it was evidence. She could no longer see it as a mistake. It was a weapon, used to ruin her, to make her fall without a single shot fired. The guards had taken Dallin, but they hadn't found the others yet. He was only the beginning. She knew this kind of plan didn't start with one man. It came from deeper, darker places within her own world's leadership. Back in her quarters, Eli waited for her, his face tired but alert. He was surrounded by open files, glowing screens, and audio logs from their investigation. When she entered, he looked up and gave a small nod. 3 more names, he said. We found connections to them in both our systems. Zira walked to the table, staring at the screen. The names meant nothing to Earth, but she knew them well. They were Varelian officials who had always spoken against peace. She clenched her fists. It's worse than I thought, she said quietly. They planned everything from the start. Eli leaned back in his chair. They planned for you to fail, he said. Or worse, they planned for you to disappear. Zira nodded. And if I vanished, she added, no one would ever trust Earth again. There was a long silence between them. Then Zira looked at him with calm but steady eyes. I want to speak before the Interplanetary Council tomorrow, she said. Not just as an ambassador, but as someone who was almost destroyed by silence. Eli raised an eyebrow. You're going to expose everything? He asked. Zira nodded. I have to, she said, or the truth dies in the shadows. That night, she barely rested. Instead, she wrote her statement word by word, carefully and clearly. She included every detail, the faulty device, the false translations, Dallin's confession, and the names of those involved. She didn't hide anything, not even her own fear or her shame. When the sun rose, the interplanetary hall was filled again, this time with tension in the air. Representatives from Earth, Varelia, and other planets sat quietly as Zira stepped onto the speaking platform. She looked small under the lights, but her voice was strong. She began with a truth no one expected. I was sent here to bring peace, she said. But someone from my own world tried to make me fall. Every word echoed through the hall, translated in real time by her backup device. She told them everything, not with anger, but with clarity. She didn't accuse Earth. She accused fear. She accused the leaders who wanted to control the future with lies and sabotage. She ended her speech with a sentence that made every delegate sit up straight. I do not stand here as someone broken by Earth, she said. I stand as someone saved by a human who simply spoke the truth. Then she stepped down. No one spoke for a long time. Then the Earth representative stood and offered her a respectful nod. Ambassador Zira, he said, you have reminded US all that peace isn't made in quiet rooms. It's made by people brave enough to speak when others stay silent. After the meeting, reporters swarmed outside the building. Zira ignored the cameras and questions. She walked with Eli through the back hallway. Away from the chaos, she didn't want fame. She wanted silence, the kind that came after surviving something dark and walking into light. As they reached the guest center again, Eli stopped and looked at her carefully. You said I saved you, he said slowly. But I didn't really do anything. Zira smiled gently. You listened, she said. And you didn't let me walk alone, Eli smiled back. Then I'll keep listening, he said, until this is truly over. Zira nodded. It wasn't over yet. Dallin was caught. But the others were still out there. But now the game had changed now. She wasn't just a visitor or an ambassador or a mistake. She was a witness. She was a voice. And she was ready to fight for peace with truth in her hands and fire in her soul. Asterisk. The days after the council meeting passed in a blur of questions, messages, and tension that refused to leave. Zira had done something bold, something no one from her world had dared before. She had spoken the truth out loud, in front of all planets, and now, her name was known across both stars and systems. Some called her a hero, some called her a traitor, but Zira didn't care about names anymore. She cared only about what came next, because now that the plot was exposed, the enemies of peace would not stay silent. They would move faster, dirtier, and from deeper shadows than before. Security around her was doubled. Eli stayed close, almost always in the same room or the one next to hers. But Zira knew that safety didn't come from walls, it came from trust, and she had learned to trust only a few. Late one evening, while Earth's sky was filled with red light from a passing comet, Zira sat across from Eli with a translator chip laid out between them. It wasn't broken this time. It was a gift, a blank, pure translator, ready to be programmed by hand. I want to build a new one, she said softly. Not one that speaks for me, but one I understand myself. Eli looked at her and smiled gently. You want to learn our language, he said. Zira nodded. I don't want machines between us anymore, she replied. I want my voice to mean what I say, not what something else says for me. And so they began, every day, for hours. Ele taught her the basics of English. She repeated words slowly, carefully, writing them down in a small journal made of real paper. Her first sentence took days to build. It wasn't long, and it wasn't perfect. But when she finally looked at Eli and said, "You kind," safe, his face lit up with something stronger than pride. It was something that couldn't be translated by any device. Zira didn't need her translator to understand his smile. Their bond, once built on confusion and error, was now becoming something real. One night, as rain tapped softly on the windows, Zira looked up from her notes and asked a question without her device. "Why you help me?" she said, her voice slow but clear. Eli leaned back in his chair and thought for a moment. "Because when I first saw you," he said, "you looked lost, like a stranger in the middle of a crowd. And I've been that person before." Zira nodded, understanding more than just his words, understanding his heart. But the piece was short. A coded message arrived from Varelia's home office, one that was meant only for her eyes. She opened it carefully, knowing it could be a trap, but what she saw made her breath stop. It was a threat not to her, but to Eli, a final warning from those still hiding behind power and lies. "Leave Earth or watch your humans suffer." The message said in her native language. She stood there frozen, her hand shaking slightly. Eli noticed and walked to her side. "What is it?" he asked gently. Zira looked at him with pain in her eyes. "They're not finished," she whispered. "They want to punish you for helping me." Eli didn't look afraid. Instead, he reached forward and touched her arm with calm strength. "Then we stay ahead of them," he said. "We don't run, we bring them into the light." Zira stared at him, her mind spinning between fear and determination. She had come to Earth as a stranger, almost lost everything because of a broken machine, and now stood at the center of a war she didn't ask for. But she had found something rare here, not just truth, not just peace, but a connection no machine could fake or translate. She looked out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. "I will not run," she said. "Not again." In the distance, sirens echoed for a moment, then faded into silence. Zira and Ilea stood side by side, knowing the real storm hadn't even begun. But this time, they would face it together, not with lies, not with false words, but with the truth and the kind of bond no translation error could ever break. The wind over the Earth City was cold that morning, but Zira didn't feel it. She stood at the edge of the launch platform, her cloak fluttering behind her, her eyes fixed on the sky above. The human base below her was waking up, lights flickering on, workers preparing for the day, and shuttles lifting off in the distance. But today was not just another day. It was the day she would speak again, not to expose lies this time, but to build something new. Beside her stood Eli, quiet and calm, wearing his same dark coat with the Earth badge on the collar. They had been through a storm together, not one made of fire or war, but of silence, misunderstanding, and shadow. And somehow, they had survived it. Zira now carried the clean translator in her pocket, not because she needed it, but because it reminded her of the past. The broken one had been destroyed, burned by her own hands in the temple fire of truth days ago. What remained now was her voice, raw, honest, and finally her own. A large crowd had gathered below the platform, both humans and Varelians, their faces looking up in curiosity and hope. Zira stepped forward. She didn't use a device, not a screen, not even a microphone. She spoke with her own voice, in slow, careful Earth words she had practiced each night under dim light with Eli's help. "I came to Earth for peace," she said. The crowd leaned in, holding their breath. "Words failed me," she continued, "but heart did not." There was a pause. "I learn your words," she said, placing a hand over her chest. "Now, I want you learn mine, then." She spoke 3 sentences in her own Varelian tongue, clear and strong. The translator feed printed the meaning overhead. "We do not hide behind fear. We do not trade lies for comfort. We stand with those who speak true." The crowd burst into quiet applause. Not wild or loud, but respectful and warm. Eli watched her, pride in his eyes, and something else too, something deeper than friendship. Zira turned and walked back to him, her steps slow, her hands still trembling just slightly from nerves. "You were perfect," Eli said softly. Zira smiled. "No," she whispered, "just honest." They walked together through the quiet halls of the guest center one last time. Today would be her last day here before returning to Varelia to stand before her own people. But she would not return as a failed ambassador. She would return as someone who had uncovered the trail, spoken truth, and built something no translation device ever could. Before they reached the gates, Eli stopped and handed her a small box. She opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny carved pendant, half earthstone, half Varelian crystal, joined in the middle. "It's not much," he said, "but it's real." Zira looked at it, then at him, and for the first time, she spoke a full sentence in perfect English, without help, without pause. "I will come back," she said, "not for duty, but for you." Eli didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, gently placed the pendant around her neck, and said only one thing: "I'll be waiting." The shuttle lifted into the sky hours later, cutting through the clouds with silent speed. Eli watched it vanish, hands in his pockets, a smile on his face, somewhere beyond the stars. Zira sat quietly, looking at the stars through the window of her ship. She didn't need a translator to understand what this journey had meant. She had come to Earth with a machine that twisted her world, but she left with something better, a bond that spoke louder than any words ever could.